On today's episode of the Lead More podcast, we sit down with my buddy Marcos Rivera to talk all things pricing. Marcos, when you watch somebody just at the peak of their knowledge, like just right in the epicenter of their craft, just do their work and do their magic, it's such a joy. And that's what I feel like this episode is. If you have ever wondered or questioned or doubted or been curious about pricing for your business, or you're even just kind of curious about how pricing works. Like pricing is really the intersection between business economics and human psychology. So Marcos is the author of this book, Street Pricing, and he works with specifically SaaS companies. He comes in and helps you really maximize and optimize your pricing. And in today's episode, we talk about, why are things priced like with the 99 cents or the $9.99? We talk about the psychology behind that. We dove into sort of bundle economics, why they're so powerful, and how when you have three options or three tiers and plans, naturally, of course, people pick the middle one, but why is that? We talked about price anchoring. We talked about how often should you change your pricing. So if you're listening to this teaser here and you haven't changed your pricing in the last year or two, you need to listen to this episode because you should be changing your pricing, and Marcos explains why. So we tackle all of this and more, how leaders, how entrepreneurs can think about human psychology, how your pricing reflects your brand and your positioning, and just really, really strong expertise. So you're going to love this episode with Marcos Rivera here on the Lead More podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lead More podcast, here with my buddy Marcos Rivera from San Diego. How you doing, Marcos?
I'm doing fantastic, John, man. Love it. Thank you for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Marcos is the smartest person I know when it comes to the topic of pricing. He's an author of a pricing book. Here we go, Street Pricing, mainly focused on B2B SaaS. But tell me the origin of kind of a specific superpower skill to have. I know you were a consultant before in your previous life, right?
You know what? To confess, I was a consultant by title, but I'm an operator by mindset.
Okay.
Right? So I'm the guy who actually built software. Okay. Some consultants have never touched, in the space, what they actually do. So I actually built, grown, and priced software myself. And I had to, stand in front of sales and tell them this is the price. I had to stand in front of customers and justify the price and the value, right? So it all comes from actually doing it and getting, smacked on the head a few times for doing it wrong, and then ultimately doing it right as you get more experience.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that comes from. And if you think about superpowers, I probably have the lamest superpower of all. But one of the things that I've realized, even going back to my early days as preteen, late tweens, is I noticed that I had a pretty good pattern recognition skills, right? So I always took those little tests, and I always aced them in terms of patterns. I took calculus very early in school before I had to, so I really had a nice knack for picking up on patterns. And as I got older, I started being able to take those patterns and create frameworks around them.
Okay.
And so the idea of, being able to see a lot of different instances of something and then be able to deduce a pattern from that is something that folks have told me I do a lot faster than they've seen. And so in doing it over these years, that's just a muscle that I just love building over and over again, which kind of helps in the profession that I'm in, right? So,
yeah. And specific to numbers, or not necessarily, just patterns in general?
Not necessarily. I thought it was specific to numbers until I started doing it with other things, behaviors as well. And which I guess
is a huge part of pricing, right?
If you love human behavior and you love making money in business strategy, pricing is kind of in the center of all that. And so I love what I do, man. I think it's a lot of fun.
Okay, that's a perfect spot to start because I want to kind of dig into some of those behaviors and pricing strategies on today's episode. I was hoping you were going to say at age 6, I watched Price is Right and I got all of the things in the showcase, every single item or something like that.
That would be awesome.
A pricing prodigy. Okay, let's start with the psychology aspect of pricing. I know I've heard Seth Godin say that pricing is marketing, right? It's not just the economics of cost of goods to cost to create and sell. Pricing is a strategy, and I don't know if we often think of it as a strategy. We just think of it as what something is worth.
Yeah, I get a lot. Like pricing, most people when they think about it, they think about the number, right? Is it 19.99, right? Is it $100, whatever it is.
Sure.
But I kind of look at pricing with a capital P, right? I kind of step back and think about what are we really trying to do here? I think it's the ultimate expression of your business strategy at the end of the day,
Hmm.
right? And how you're exchanging for value is really what's behind the whole pricing mechanism. So it's not about, if it's $100, $200. Yes, of course, that's important because that kind of sends a signal. But what do you give away for free? What do you not give away for free? What are the things that they pay for up until certain points? There's elements of time, there's elements of sequence, there's elements of psychology like anchoring and reciprocity and other things like that that come into play.
Yeah.
And so all of that to me is pricing.
So you hit on one. I thought of like the 1999. I feel like in everyday life, even as a young kid, that's sort of the first one we see, whether it be gas prices or you're at Target or the store. What is the psychology behind that one?
Yeah, the 99 principle. So it's known in the pricing circle as charm pricing. All right. And
Okay.
charm pricing, what you've seen, this has been around for a really long time, is that we as humans kind of we read left to right, especially, in the Western world, we read left to right. And so what you're finding is oftentimes our brain is coding left to right. And
Sure.
what companies realize is that, hey, look, if I can take this $100 or this 100 and make it 99, I have less digits. It's fewer. It's like two, right? Versus three.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you're able to then see a lower number. So say 400 is now 399. Well, you process the three, right? And then the
Sure.
99 comes in afterwards. But the way you process that information, the three sticks out. And three is less than four. And therefore, you feel like it's a little bit less. Now, this concept has been around for a really long time, dozens of years. And humans have now gotten a little bit, I wouldn't say desensitized to it, but maybe
Okay.
kind of used to it in a sense, right? Where they now view that 99 and they signal bargain.
Mm.
And you've seen it in a lot of sales, in a lot of different messaging when it comes to trying to move merchandise. You'll see the 99s, 99-cent special, this is 99 cents. And so what now the brain is associating with is something that is probably on sale or something cheaper that you would get elsewhere. And therefore that creates a sensation of, okay, I should probably buy this because it's
Wow.
it's a deal.
Yeah. So maybe do you not see that charm pricing in the, say, the luxury goods space, for instance?
So that's where it flips a little bit, right? So pricing should represent your brand and messaging. I go back to my capital P, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, if you're saying 50% off and you're throwing 99's charm pricing out there and you're a Louis Vuitton luxury brand, high-end premium, that sends mixed signals and it confuses the mind, and a confused mind never buys, right? That's a
Yes.
lesson I
Yes.
learned very
That's
early
great.
on.
Good line.
And so from my perspective, when you're a premium brand, you want to go with more whole numbers. It's a little bit more confident. It also allows you to process the number a little bit easier. And the whole number in and of itself kind of sends a signal that that this is going to be more of an emotional buy than a rational buy. So let me take it one step further, which is rational buys and emotional buys, right? You buy something based on your emotional reaction, rational buys as well. If you're looking at a number and you're seeing 2,500, you're seeing 3,000, you're seeing 10,000, oftentimes that magnitude is already in your brain and you're trying to justify it because you want it. You want it bad,
Yeah.
wherever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And you're trying to justify the magnitude. On the flip side, if you're being very cautious and specific, when you see a number instead of 10,000, you're seeing 9,455. Okay, well, that's more precise. That means more
Yeah.
thought went into this
Yeah.
number. That means this is something that is bottoms up calculated, and it feels a little bit more legit. And so those are kind of the things you do. The power of numbers, which is a very central part of pricing, right? Is what number you use to communicate your value.
Yeah, that latter one we always did at Lemonly was, if a client says, "Well, we have a $50,000 budget," we definitely didn't want to send 50, right? It was like 48,750 or something like very specific, even though, right, it's
That's right.
basically the same thing at that scale. But help me understand, because you hit it perfectly. I wanted to go there. The psychology of, like, say, bundles or tiers, and in the SaaS world, I think of, like, silver, gold, platinum, or ABC. But then I also, in a non-pricing world, I even say with the entrepreneurs I coach, anytime your customer has to make a choice, it's a chance where you could potentially lose them, right? So your point about a confused mind is not a buyer. Um, how do we justify, rationalize those two things? Like, Marcos, I have three options for you to pick from, but I also don't want you to be confused.
That is a super good question because I have a point of view on this that might be a little different than other folks on this one, right? So
Okay.
I have this idea that as you expand your business, it doesn't have to be SaaS. Yes, I do pricing in the software world, but a lot of these principles apply to most businesses. Is that the more problems you solve for more people, the more naturally complex you become.
Yeah.
And the key here is to not let that complexity lead to confusion and lead to that complication. I'll go back to what I said earlier, right? And so there is such thing as good complexity. And it
Sure.
feels like an oxymoron, right? Good complexity. What? Isn't all complexity bad?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, not necessarily, right? You can add some dimensions to your packaging, to your bundles, to your pricing without overly complicating the offer mix, right? And so common ways to do that. Number one is if you have three offers, oftentimes the one in the middle is the one that you're really trying to position for the sale.
Yeah. Most popular, right?
Most popular, best value. You see a lot of different call outs in the middle. It's called the Goldilocks effect, right? Just like the
Yep.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right?
Sure.
And
Just right.
oftentimes when information is low and you don't have a lot to go on, you tend to go into the middle. Think about the bottle of wine on the menu, right? I don't want the cheapest wine. I don't want the most
Totally.
expensive. I'll go in the
That's so
middle.
true.
So we do it as a safety mechanism because we as humans, we want to survive and live. And so we try to avoid extremes, right? And so if you have three offerings because maybe there's an entry level that's lightweight that, maybe it's for a customer that's early in their life cycle, and then maybe a bigger, more robust one that is fully like, the all included, but the kitchen sink. And then
Yeah.
in the middle, that tends to be the most common. And by the way, when you use this technique, you want half your business or more in the middle.
Okay.
If that's the dynamic, because remember, you're serving a wider audience, then you want to make it so the identity of each of these packages is obvious, right?
Yeah.
And you put like, this is for, an early stage company with less than 20 employees doing less than 5 million a year. I made that up, right? But now,
Specific.
okay, you want to get specific. So when they read it, they're like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's what I want. I'm going there. And so the idea behind it is if you have multi options, you have to position them and you have to identify them. So that way it's a no brainer for the evaluator to pick the one that best suits them.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense to me. And I suppose then the philosophy in the software world, or really any services, when you get them at the one that fits them, we can then grow their value or expand the revenue into other tiers as they feel more connected.
And that's the life cycle sequence. So what happens is where a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong is that they stuff way too much in there, and in an attempt to raise the value, right? To say, look how valuable this is. You get this and this and this and this
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this.
yeah.
But what ends up happening is actually the opposite happens. When someone evaluates that and say, wow, this is great, I'm really only going to use a fraction of all that. So can you actually just drop the price for me? And then you'll start seeing that phenomenon come around.
Negotiating, yeah.
And they'll start negotiating down, or they'll start breaking up the bundle and saying, can I have this but not that? Or how about if I just pay for these? Or, the old Chris Rock, for Saturday, what can I get for let me just take a little suck. Let me just get a little drink, right? And I don't want to buy the whole thing, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the idea behind that is when you load it with too much value, the package gets bloated and then the opposite effect happens. So you want to give them just enough for where they are in their journey. That's the key, for where they are. And then as they grow, then comes in things like add-ons or an upgrade path or something else to help them along the way. And that's super hard to figure out because it forces you to really know your customer inside and out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like that. So it's clear already, just in that capital P, how much strategy comes into this process. What is your thought on? I've heard people, like, I'm in the coaching services world, where people will have like a VIP day or like a thing that nobody really asks for, but they have it in case someone asks for it, right? Like, I know we have a mutual friend who'd be like, it's $50,000 to spend a day with me, type of thing. What does that do? Is that anchoring, or what is the
That
philosophy
is
behind something?
exactly what it is. Yeah. So sometimes what you end up doing is, I go back to the $200 cheese grill. I think it's some restaurant in New York, right? Grilled cheese
Okay.
sandwich, right?
Okay.
And so you think about $200 grilled cheese sandwich, you're like, who would spend that kind of money on a sandwich, right? But the idea behind it is it's on the menu. It's a thing. They make a whole, spiel about it.
Sold section. Yeah.
But they still have their $35 grilled cheese sandwiches, which, by the way, is still a ton of money to spend
Still
on a
crazy.
sandwich. But
Bread and
compared to the
cheese.
$200 one, you're like, oh, well, let me just get one of these and be fine. At least I'm part of the whole allure, right? So you could have a really high ticket plan, a really high number out there that actually makes the other number feel a little bit more reasonable. And there is no escaping the anchoring effect, all right? I know the effect
You
inside and
know when you
out, and it
see it.
works on me. It works on
Yep.
me. I had last year, my wife bought a couch, okay? And she showed me these couches, and they were outrageous, okay? They were super high, expensive. So when she bought the other one, which wasn't cheap, but she bought it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. At least it wasn't one of those over
Yeah.
there. So my wife uses it on me all the time.
So that's okay. So what are some of those other kind of common ones? Like I think of, you talked a little bit about, like, I think of bundle economics every time I go to Amazon, right? People who buy this also buy this. Or what are some of those everyday psychological pricing things that we maybe don't even know are happening to us?
Yeah, man. Those are very so those are those tangential pricing, what I call packaging techniques that allow folks to just take a step deeper. Okay. I call this take a small bite, chew fast, take another small bite, chew fast, take another small bite, right? So
Sure.
think about French fries became one of the most famous examples of this, right? It's like, hey, look, would you just walk into McDonald's and buy some fries? It's probably pretty rare. It happens, but
Yeah.
and oftentimes, because it's coming with the burger and you're like already there and you're buying the burger and it's such a small amount of money compared to the burger, and it's easy to eat because you just eat it with the finger, right? It's very easy.
Yeah.
It's a
Salty. You want more?
it's low friction, low ratio price point, and that allows folks to go in. So notice I said two things: low friction and low ratio. So people feel weird if the French fries were more expensive than the burger, John. You think people would buy it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'll feel kind of off.
It's like a side item. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so you want the side to feel like a side. But the trick here is to make it very lightweight and easy to step into. And this is the problem where I think some folks fall into is they'll have a side come in. They'll charge too much for it, which makes it less attractive to come in because it's being anchored again by the main
Yeah.
thing. And then secondly, it takes like 10 steps to get it, or it takes all this extra effort to get it. And you have to make sure it's got to stay low effort to get, meaning it's got to be easier than even the original thing that you're getting into, or even better, easier because of the original thing you got into,
Sure.
right? And so that's the trick there. If you can align that next piece, then the next step is very compelling for that buyer.
So to carry on the McDonald's example, you have these addictive salty fries. They're anchored off of the burger, but then also, like, I don't really need a soda, but I might as well, right? Because I got the value meal and just bundle it all up.
Right? You got to wash it down with something, right? And I think at the end of the day, the soda is actually one of the most profitable pieces for them from a margin perspective, right? I
Sure.
mean, they make really great
Just
margins
water and
on
sugar.
those
Yeah.
drinks. It's water and sugar, those drinks, right? And and so the combination actually just flows really well, right? This supplements that, and then the saltiness needs also increases thirst, which means you also have to wash it down with the drink, right? So I don't know, little known secret about me. I used to work at McDonald's when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I actually know a little more behind the
So you
scenes
know
than
the inside out. Yeah.
most people. But the idea is the sequence. And that's what I want everybody to think about when you're looking at pricing with a capital P is, yes, you got that psychology, right? You got your packages, right? You see all the P's that are coming out, but you want to make sure that the sequence, right, or the pattern in which they buy is well understood, so you can align your products and services in that way.
Yeah. Really cool. Okay. So you kind of opened my eyes thinking about McDonald's, because I think, and I always thought of pricing strategy probably doesn't really come in until items get more expensive, right? Like you talked about bottoms up pricing. Like if I go buy eggs at the grocery store, I kind of just think those eggs are basically determined on the cost, but I'm sure that's not true. So like how much of pricing do you say, how much of in the marketplace are we buying because of the strategic pricing, or are we buying based off of cost plus 20% margin or whatever?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. There's still a lot of cost plus out there, and I think
Okay.
and especially when your costs fluctuate, I think it gets really hard to move away from it, and it's such a big determining factor into the margins that oftentimes the easy way to come up with the price is just to slap on a bit of a buffer on and maintain that buffer over time. Where I think a lot of companies evolve from that is that, hey, if my eggs are organic, open range and all
Yeah,
these
farm
things, right?
fresh. Yeah,
Farm
yeah.
fresh with extra omegas and all that stuff. I've seen them all, right? Now you're starting to add those differentiating layers on top of the cost that allow you to then capture a premium, because no one's going to pay a premium for nothing. Right? Like nobody wants to do that. Like, why would I
Yeah.
look at Crest and Colgate and look at the same two toothpaste with the exact same branding and everything and just pay 30-40% more than this one, right? It doesn't necessarily, we don't really think that way. And we as humans don't really necessarily calculate that. Like, I can't tell you that I'm willing to pay $4.32 maximum for a burger. That's my willingness to pay.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
know that
It just
in
happens.
general, it's this much money and this is what I pay for it, right? So when you're pricing out there, your cost plus folks, I think, really have an opportunity to maybe evolve a little bit away from that and capture some of the additional things. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a better. Your egg could be the same as the other egg, but maybe your packaging is better. Maybe it's delivered faster. Maybe it's fresher. Whatever it is, right? But the idea is you could differentiate on things around the core product that could allow you to move away from the cost plus piece. So that's
Interesting.
one tip for everybody.
Yeah, and I didn't think I was going to go here, but like in the cost plus world, I think a lot about the last 24 months and everything we've heard about inflation, right? Like I suppose you're a little bit exposed there when your cost plus downstream from what your actual costs are, right?
Yeah, it hurts because you're now your costs are going up, so your margins compress, and to keep that from happening, you have to increase your prices. But now in a world like this, folks have less money to spend, and so now you're more expensive, and people's wallets are going down. It's a really
Yep.
bad combo, right, to be in.
Yep. Yep.
And so the best way to work around that, by the way, is you could still have your ability to maintain margins doesn't have to be so one dimensional. So what I mean by that is you could have, from a dozen to the six pack that maybe they're not, organic omega-3 or whatever it is. You can have a leaner plan that fits a price point that's more compelling. You can have your core brand that goes up a little bit, and then go back to that anchor effect. You can have a very high. There's some people out there who would always want the best no matter what,
Yep.
but it
Yep.
could also serve as an anchoring mechanism to your middle.
We'll
So
drop the eggs off at your door.
you'll drop the eggs off at your door, polish them up, whatever you want, right? And so the idea, I think we're losing this analogy, right? But I mean, the point is you can, if you add a few extra type of offerings and don't just fixate on one offer and one price, it makes it very obvious and apparent that you've jacked up your prices, and then people react to that. They'll immediately start comparing you to other things. If you give them a few options, going back to the Goldilocks effect, you still want them to buy your core thing, but
Yep.
those that are sensitive or on the budget can opt for something a little less, and those who just really want the gusto and all the goodies, they will pay for the more. So that's
Cool.
that's
Yep.
where that comes in and helps.
So clearly, you know this stuff really well. You've shown your expertise there. We've talked about a few of the psychology tactics. What do you see as the most common mistakes? So when you come into maybe a client, like a SaaS client, or even just when you're out shopping, you're like, ugh, how could they do this? What do you see as most business operators pricing mistakes?
If I had to distill it down to a couple that I see that are pretty common out there, and again, I work with a lot of software companies that are trying to monetize something that's kind of fluffy, right? Is the value
Yeah.
of the software. But the first thing I notice is that they try to do what's called a good, better, best tiering model, which is you got a good package, you got a better, and you got a best, similar to what I talked about.
Yep.
But the good, better, best model, very common, 72% of these software companies use it. And it makes sense, right? Those who want less get less, those who want more get more, right? And that's okay, but they don't actually really do the research to know what goes into each of these packages. And there's a second dimension of the jumps. Remember, I talked about the sequence, what happens next?
Yeah.
You don't really think through that. And so a big mistake I see is the entry plan is way too generous. These got
Sure.
stuffed way too much because they're trying to hook them, right? So
Yep.
the way to hook is more and more and more, but that's not always the case. Going back to what I said earlier, you actually want to give them tastes. But the right taste is what you have to spend time sitting down figuring out. And that taste then leads them into the middle where you want most of them hanging out. And then those who just keep on going, and those are again, that upper echelon, those folks that just want to keep pushing, can expand with a few add-ons and then move on to the higher end plan. And so that's the big mistake, is way too much in the entry level and not a thoughtful jump to the next. The second big thing I see is you're actually undercharging still. And what I mean by
Yep.
that is, I would say 8 out of 10 companies I work with are undercharging somewhere, right? And they don't do it on purpose. They don't wake up in the morning and say, "Let me undercharge, please."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what's happening is that they came up with a model early on, early stage, and it sold. Like, they actually got a customer to say yes, and then sales started running behind it, and they started just continuing, the momentum that is business, and you sort of get lost in a lot of it.
Yep.
But
Yep.
you don't want to mess with the pricing too much because, well, they said yes, and if I change it, will it slow me down? Will it, inhibit sales, or will customers start leaving me, or whatever it is? And then you start getting a little bit scared. And then what ends up happening is, over time, as you keep expanding and innovating and changing and all these things, the pricing is still way back there from
Yeah.
years ago.
Yep.
And so this notion that you've added all this value over time and you're still only priced at the yes that you got 2 or 3 years ago leads to a lot of undercharging. And I've seen companies jump 20, 40, 60% in their selling prices just by making adjustments to their price and packages. That's the key. And so that's the second biggest one, is undercharging all the way through.
Sure.
If I had to give you a third one, and this one is also a little bit of a sneaky one, is things that should be add-ons that are stuffed into the other plans. And
Ah.
what I mean by that is, if you have something that maybe 20% of your customers really want and the others are like, don't really care, and it's in the plan because you want to please
Got it.
them,
Yep.
it's actually more detracting than anything else, right? You're better off pulling that thing out, highlighting it, and then having those who want it add. When that happens, they're actually a little bit more willing to pay for it, and that's another gotcha area. So those are the
Yeah.
three
And
that
then
I
you get some
see.
expansion revenue. I'm seeing that all over software right now with AI, right? Like, hey, $10 more if you want to integrate AI. Because you're probably right. A lot of people probably don't care yet, but there are people
No,
that do care and will pay for it.
no, no. I mean, you said AI is very interesting. So AI, in my view, has always started off as big A, little I, very artificial, very little intelligence. But the last few years, that has changed. Like, we've been seeing with Chat GPT and all these other really big pushes out into the AI space, does some pretty cool stuff, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm
Yep.
not just talking summarizing your meeting minutes. I mean other
Yep.
things as well. And so now it's beginning to get traction, and companies are trying to figure out, how do I price this thing, right? And I'll give you
Yeah.
the little framework I came up with on AI pricing. Right?
Okay.
It's an easy one. It's really quick, right? So the AI, and this is in the software space, will then enhance something, right? If your AI is simply just allowing you to do the core things a little bit better, like you're a meeting tool, and it just lets you monetize or automate those meetings a little bit better,
To summarize, yep.
it's just an extension of what you're already doing, right? And so oftentimes I call that the sort of like underpin the value of what you have today, right? But then you have the other one, which is upgrade, which is now you're able to do something that's the next step in the journey. I could process invoices. Now I can predict their payment on the invoice, right? This is
Sure.
another step forward, and that's the upgrade. And those usually work better as add-ons, right? So when you're supporting the core, you can roll it in and raise your price. If you're an upgrade, you can bolt it on as an add-on and then let them pay for it. And then the
Yeah.
third one is for me, like what I call unveil, which is a whole new use case. And this entire use case was not possible before. Might even be a different buyer or a different person, and that becomes its own standalone sell as well. And you bundle those. And so those are some of the key ideas. There is, you can
I
include
like
it,
that.
you can add it on, or you can bundle it or sell it alone, depending on the experience the AI is changing. That's the big one.
And I suppose in that third one you talked about, like where you include things that should be upgrades in the software world, we can know that based on usage, signups, like how often they use the tool. I mean, like I suppose the data will shine bright on what those items are.
The data is huge, and that's one of the big things that I think are a lot of companies are worried about, is because they don't even have some of those tracking mechanisms in place. So, surprise, surprise. Sometimes I'll walk into a company, I'll say, "Great, what are your customers doing in the software?" We don't really track it that well, right? We don't really know, and that makes pricing really hard when you're not sure how they're getting value.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I want to go before we wrap. I want to get to changing pricing, because you mentioned one of the common common mistakes is undercharging, and then I'm guessing it's also hard to say all of a sudden overnight we're doubling our prices.
Yeah.
I've watched you work your expertise in a room full of software entrepreneurs, and usually it seems like your advice is charge more, charge more, charge more, and you are giving them permission, which I think is important, because I think that psychology cuts both ways. Like, the psychology to the consumer, but also as the founder, when, to your point, when they say yes, you think I better stay at that price. When you say no, you start to doubt your own product or service and then maybe lower your price. I felt that as a coach, right? Like, ooh, it sounds kind of expensive. Well, am I too expensive, or I'm just not talking to the right customer, right? So yeah, talk about pricing changes. How often? How do you communicate pricing changes? What's the right frequency?
Such a good question there, because I think when it comes to changing prices, this is the piece that I think gets most human of all, right? There's always this art and science in pricing, right? But
Yeah.
this human element of it, right? Asking for money is still a hard thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like asking a guy or gal out on a date. It's you set yourself up for rejection, right? And all those
Yeah,
things.
even if you're confident, it's still hard. Yeah.
And so I open up, and even in my book, Street Pricing, I open up with pricing is about confidence at the end of the day. So when I'm working with these folks, sometimes they just need a little bit more confidence and evidence that they can actually charge more without screwing everything up, right?
Yep.
And so where that comes from, when I think about, is it time to change pricing? Well, look, if you haven't changed pricing in 2 years, it's probably a little stale somewhere, right?
Yep.
This goes back to Moore's law and how frequently people, change and update and all that stuff. But when it comes to, okay, should I raise prices? Should I change my model, et cetera? Well, the first thing you want to know is change for who. You want to look at, are you serving different people? Are you now serving bigger customers, or now are you trying to go down and capture a lot more smaller customers? And like, what are you trying to do? If the customer is exactly the same and the product is exactly the same, then you don't have a lot of room to change your pricing. But when I talk to folks, it's pretty rare that that's the case.
Yeah,
Something
you just
has changed
haven't
over
changed
time.
anything in 2 years.
So
Yeah.
let's isolate what that is. Let's understand it, and let's see where we can introduce the evidence that you need, whether it's comparing to your competitors and the alternative, and comparing to how much value you're driving to the customer. And I'm like, oh man, that takes real work. It does. Okay, it does take real work, because you're not just going to get millions of dollars falling into your lap for doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so my take is to always just do a quick 360. What I mean by that is, talk to your customers. I do this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing. Okay. Talk
Okay.
to 5 customers, right? Talk to, I would say, 4 non-customers. And what I mean by that is a prospect or somebody who
sure.
hasn't really used your product before, right? And then look at 3 competitors, usually at the same level, higher and lower, and see where you're at there. And then look at the last 2 years, if you've been around for 2 years, okay? Or at least the last couple years. And you can kind of see if you're winning more or winning less. Like, what's the trend been happening? Are you discounting more? Are you people not asking for discounts? Like, what's going on here, right? In terms of the trend of what your customer base looks like. And then the one is 1 year out. So look at 6 months before and 6 months ahead. What can you highlight to recalibrate your customers and prospects on the value? What does that mean? Well, you probably sold them on the value a while back, and this is if they've been with you on a subscription or you sold in the past. But chances are you have to recalibrate and talk and highlight the great things you've done since then. Maybe you've added more to your service. Maybe you went from 24/5 to 24/7 support. Maybe you did something, and you want to highlight those. And then you also want to get them excited for the new stuff that's coming out.
That's good.
And the price increase, here's the last piece, the key. The price increase is helping you fulfill your mission, whether that's to unlock opportunities for other entrepreneurs, or whether that's to increase your productivity at work, or whether that's to, make your dog the happiest dog in the world, whatever your mission is,
Yep. Yep.
that pricing is going to help you. It's help you do that. And so you show them evidence. Look what I've done. Look what I'm doing. And when the price goes up, the customer base then feels like, okay, I'm helping you to achieve your mission. People get it. The prices go up
Yeah.
all the time. But the big mistake is to raise them without recalibrating the value. That's where people say, hey, I'm paying more money for the same stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody likes that.
Yeah, and I feel like you can almost tell that dichotomy in the email that you get from your software tool of like, you can tell the ones that know like, hey, we've added like a lot of cool stuff to our product. It's been 3 years since we've changed, like, and you're kind of like, okay, like keep charging my credit card. And then you can tell the ones that are like, it's very like a lot of verbiage and a lot of words. They're trying to justify why they're doing
They
this.
try to like look over here, don't look over there. But Spotify's been doing this. Like the first time they did it around,
Yes.
they were a little sloppy, right? But then the second time they got it a little bit better. We've added more content. We also want to make, fulfill our mission for helping these artists and giving them a platform and all that stuff, right? They have the family plan that they're trying to move you into because they know people share accounts, right?
Yep,
All
totally.
of this stuff goes down, right? And so this is the framing and messaging of a price increase is actually just as important as the increase itself.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't usually admit this. Well, I don't think they listen, but I'm still on the Lemonly family Spotify account from sold my company, and that's the one subscription I don't pay for anymore because I'm still on that one. But
No, yeah, I am a big violator. My Netflix account, I feel like 4 people already are using it, right? At the same time. They're cracking down on that, by the way. I mean, I'm getting in trouble, but yes.
Okay, well, this is awesome. So smart in this area. I do want to know. I mean, I know you serve a lot of software founders and customers, but I've found your book to be very helpful just in some of this general philosophy. So, if someone wants to learn more about this, the book, following you on social media, you have a podcast as well. What are ways that, like, tell me about who you serve and how someone can learn from you?
No, absolutely. I'm really easy to find. If you go to Marcos Rivera in LinkedIn, you can follow me there. I post stuff all the time. The book is doing really well. And yeah, I'm surprised at the number of non-SaaS people who buy it and enjoy it. Street Pricing is in Amazon. You just type in Street Pricing and it pops right up. And then, of course, if you ever want to talk to me or my team and see if there's any ways that we can help you out or get some free goodies, you can go to pricingio.com, and that's where you'll get all the other stuff.
Awesome. So you did hint at it a little bit, but the question I always like to finish on Lead More is your superpower. So what's the thing you do best, better than anyone else? I'll have you kind of articulate that.
Yeah, my superpower, again, going back to my childhood, is that quick pattern recognition and framing, right? So even with the capital P, right, just coming up with it's packaging, it's the pattern, right? It's all these key things. From my perspective, I kind of look at things and then I reshape them to create I have a 5Q framework. I have the 4C framework. I have, the 1020 framework. I have a lot of different frameworks. And what it does is just helps people kind of consume it and understand it. So if I had to say, hey, look, taking complex ideas and just kind of distilling them down to stuff that regular, normal people can understand and use, that's been a superpower that I've happily stumbled upon and keep using every day.
Yeah, and even like the, reverse engineering, the psychology behind the 99. Like, I hadn't thought about the left to right, the way we process from left to right. Like now that makes so much sense. And so you just kind of take
you won't be able to see it.
I know.
The same
I know. It's so true. Well, Marcos, thanks so much for coming on the show, and love to call you a friend and good to catch up. So thanks for sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun. Good to see you.
All right, you take care. All right, that was Marcos Rivera here on the Lead More podcast. Thanks, Marcos, for sharing your wisdom and your time. Remember, you can listen to the Lead More podcast wherever you subscribe to podcast, Apple, Spotify, Castro. Go subscribe, leave us a review, or you might be watching this on YouTube. Go there and subscribe as well. All the episodes are in video format, and we drop them every other Thursday, sometimes even more frequently, but at least every other week. The Lead More podcast is there to help you as a leader, as an entrepreneur, grow your business, grow your life, and achieve your dreams and what you're trying to build. So, as always, friends, take care and be well.